Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This is a Kingdom. This is Kingdom Apologetics, and I'm going to be making my first video. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking a look at the Wes Huff versus Billy Carson debate. For those of you that don't know who either of these guys are, Wes Huff is a Reformed Christian apologist for, I believe it's Apologetics Canada. I will try to find that account and link it in the description of the video. And as well, I will be linking the full debate of the in the description of this video as well. So there's some few key main points I want to go over, but we're not going to go over the entire debate, but we're going to go over the few key main points. Like I think right at the beginning of this debate, uh, Billy Carson makes a claim about the crucifixion of Jesus not being in the sign in what he calls the Sinai Bible. He's just referring to Codex Sinaiticus. All right, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Give me grace. This is the first video. Still kind of figuring stuff out. It'll get better as I go along.
Jesus was not
Sure.
crucified, or that's not accurate?
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay. According to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James Version of the Bible. And
He just said that predates the King James version of the Bible, as if the King James is, whatever. But the King James came out in 1611. It was officially posted and it published in 1611. But Codex Sinaiticus is, I believe, a 4th century Greek manuscript, cover to cover of the Bible. It's a codex. It is not a Sinai Bible.
the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is
It's
that
funny.
they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard
He's
Seminary,
talking about textual variants.
which
none of those
according to
textual
some
variants
scholars, it's a
actually
little
change the
controversial,
meaning
but they
of the
claim that
text.
this is an accurate record that Jesus may have
It's
even been
really
married.
stuff like, imagine
then,
if
adds
you read
more, if
something
that's
that
true,
said,
it adds more to the
sky is
hypothesis
blue,
that maybe he
and then
wasn't crucified.
in the other text it
I
said,
just
I
personally
walked
believe
outside and the
that
sky was
Jesus
blue.
was an amazing human being.
That's a textual
I
variant,
don't think that he was the
but it
Son of
doesn't
God in
change
the
the
sense
meaning of
that
the story.
he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods, and that we're to do greater things in him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ.
Okay, so he's referring to, there's a place in the New Testament where Jesus is arguing with some Pharisees, and he says, didn't I say ye are gods? Jesus was actually referring back to Psalm 82. And I want to go ahead and read this so we can get the full context on that, because God's not actually saying that you are gods. And I think you'll see that once I read all the way through the text. But let's go ahead and read it. This is Psalm 82. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give injustice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. But what I really want to focus on right here is verse 6 and 7, where God says, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Because the term right here of the context of gods is God placed these people in roles of authority over others, nations, etc. And all they are ruling men, princes. Um, so they have power over their people like a god, but they're not gods at all, which is why he says, like men, you shall die. All right, let's go ahead and go. Let's get
Christ
back to it.
is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on that those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously. And I think at the
Man, that's
second
silly.
coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
And Wes, I'm gonna let you respond to that. And again, I mean, this is everyone listening to the show. I'm always like challenge everything. Learn
It's
to
a little
critically
bit.
think and continue to come to your conclusions.
A little bit of a jaunt, but I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying
Seems like
question?
a very small
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming it's the mountain that
You
they're
said that you
referencing there.
can look
But
this up on Amazon. You know what? For the sake of the video, let's go ahead and go to Amazon.com and see what comes up when we type in Sinai Bible. The Sinai. No such thing. Save versus God. Spiritual Growth Bible. CB CSB. Okay. They say you bought it on Amazon, Billy. Check that out. No such thing as a Sinai Bible. It just brings up regular Bibles. Okay, let's go ahead and leave Amazon. No. I just thought that was funny.
they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James version being put out.
Sure. So, when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay, that's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library, so you can go and see it. It's on display, and the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350
Okay,
AD.
so that's about what
and
I thought.
Its text of the Gospels
if you guys are wondering,
almost identical to the modern Greek text that we...
If you guys are wondering why I'm talking I have to talk over the video here and there so that I don't get copyright struck. But let's go ahead and dive right back in. Just want to make that clarification.
Develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I
Billy
think
Carson's pulling out the phone. You can't see. I'm blocking him, but he's pulling out the phone.
Confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So
Go to
actually,
Chat
are you able
GPT
to
right now?
pull up
No,
the
I'm just kidding.
website?
I
Would
don't know
the
if he's doing that, but
viewers or listeners or whatever be able to see that?
Right now to make sure I have the right the version that I'm looking at.
While he's pulling that up too, like I keep saying to all the people that aren't
okay.
Scientists traveling the world and
what does
linguists,
Billy
I don't even
Carson
know how to pronounce it the right way, like me.
Yeah, linguists.
I think he
What
brings up the
cyanide? I
Gospel
keep
of
thinking of
Barnabas or
cyanide,
something
like
like
the
that,
point.
which is
Cyanide Bible, so
a
is that
forgery. It's
like a
not real.
version. So from my own knowledge that I know, like when I really studied all this, what I thought was interesting about the Bible
Let's go ahead.
was how many like different eyewitness. I studied C.S. Lewis back in the day. How many different eyewitnesses and stuff there were, and they went like cross-reference throughout history and throughout those times.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's
cyanide, like the
stupid ad. Okay. I'm pretty sure he brings out the Gospel of
cyanide
Barnabas.
Bible. So is that like a cyanide Bible? Is was that where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Gospel of Barnabas. Forgery.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are two manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have two copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat
Italian and Spanish. Italian and Spanish. I don't know if you guys know, but Old Testament was written in Hebrew. New Testament was written in Koine Greek. But what the apostles had, they had what was in their time. They had a Old Testament version of the Bible that is called the Greek Septuagint. It was just a Greek translation of the Hebrew text. There's never been any Spanish or Italian original manuscripts.
Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are two apocryphal documents from the 2nd century. But the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River.
Man, it's like
so
Billy
never mind
really
there
didn't do
not being a route from the Jordan River to
he did like a very base
around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas. Never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante or it also refers to a
So,
rule of the
paraphrasing
time of
Dante's
Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian,
Yep.
and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I
and this is
approach any
important.
type of source.
You always
So if
gotta
there is
have
something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure
this.
that I'm analyzing it, and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible. The hesitation I have with what you said,
Sorry, just
Billy,
fast forwarding a little bit.
is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the
Which
crucifixion.
is pretty crazy.
And so if we're relying on
God
something
preserved
like
his
the Gospel
word.
of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than.
If you say it's a known forgery, Nash, but I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New
Well, hold on,
Testament.
because
Whoa,
do you mind if I address the Gospel
whoa.
of Jesus' wife?
Buddy, how are you gonna make a big claim like that? And then when Wes just does what he does, like you gotta be ready for a comeback. But instead, he just stood down and said, "Yeah, you're right. My bad. That's a forgery." So it's like, did you know that it was a forgery, or were you intentionally hoping that it wasn't? I don't know. I don't want to inflict any false accusations on Billy here. Billy seems like a nice guy. Let's go ahead and keep watching. I think next, but he just tried to pivot like immediately. Like he just tried to do the little shuffle. Like, oh, okay, well, let's go over here. I think Wes backtracks him and wants to deal, I think, with the gospel of Jesus' wife.
Sure, go ahead.
What was her name?
Yeah,
I'm like trying to write notes like
Yep.
I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus'
I'm
wife
like you,
doesn't
Mark.
actually
I don't know
mention.
what I'm
So
doing.
oftentimes what happens is that
You got a
the
cooler
text of the
studio
Gospel
than
of
I do,
Jesus'
though.
wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that Mary Magdalene, that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in
There is anything
parallel
like
to
that
kind of
mentioned
for
in
this
the
argument,
Bible.
for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text
That's cool.
was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear. And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife.
This is exactly why we need
know
people like
that this
Wes
is not
Huff.
a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife, and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and kind of, she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text of that was borrowed in the phraseology.
This is a slaughter, and
Jesus'
Wes Huff is doing this in the
I just
most Christ-like
that
manner
out
I've ever
is
seen.
once again with our sourcing. I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody.
The sad thing about this is Billy Carson has been making this claim for years. He made it on the Joe Rogan podcast that the crucifixion of Jesus is not the Sinai Bible. I think he did it on the Andrew Schultz podcast too. But he's been saying this stuff since like 2017. And it's crazy that it took until, I believe this debate took place in October of 2024. Got released, I believe, in November or December. I think it was December that it finally got released because Billy tried to fight and didn't want this debate to be released. As now you could see why he doesn't want this debate to get released. But gratefully for us, in the grace of God, here we have it, and we can look, we can listen, and just see what went down. And I don't really see the big issue because, like, Billy, if you just, you got these basic things, why not just say, okay, yeah, why don't we run this back? I have other things to talk about. I have other issues with the Bible. Here's my sources, and then have a, regular debate. But he has no interest in being anywhere near Wes Huff. It sucks. It's so unfortunate how this whole situation played out. But by the glory of God, by the grace of God, we're seeing the glory of God.
In the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
That's fair enough. I can respect that. So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit.
He just wants
Predominantly
to
from
pivot.
my
He
research,
doesn't defend any of his
I
claims.
discovered that a lot of information from the Enuma Elish and the Seven Tablets of Creation is a lot of the in Genesis, a lot of the creation story that comes into Genesis. Not all of it, but because obviously it's a smaller Genesis is a much smaller version of a much bigger story. But it's literally almost word for word from the Enuma Elish and the Seven Tablets of Creation. The Epic of Atrahasis as
word
well
for word.
is
Enuma
also
Elish.
there in the Old Testament.
Let's go ahead and see if we can go ahead and look this up. I don't know how to spell it, but I'm sure Google will fix that for me. But he's talking about the Numi Elish, and he says that it's a word for word, or he said it's almost a word for word copy of Genesis is almost a word for word copy of the Enuma Elish. Enuma Elish. PDF. This is going to be interesting because I've actually never looked at this. When in the height heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not hear name, Sue who begat them, and chaos did not both, the waters were together, and new fields formed, and portions to be seen. One of the gods, none had been called into being, none bore name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods. Who created the gods? Okay, whatever. In the midst of heaven, below in the middle, he called into being ages of priest. Dude, this is nothing like Genesis. Let me go ahead and move myself. That way you guys can see the full text. So I'm moving. Look at me. Move me right. Just so that see this. So that you guys can see exactly what I'm reading. None of that. I'm sorry. None of that looks like the start of Genesis. Okay, so let's go ahead and look. Let's go. Genesis, chapter 1, ESV. Some gateway, I like my gateway. I don't. You tell me. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Isn't that beautiful? The Trinity, right at the very beginning of the Bible, first verse. Sorry, the first two verses. That's not what we're talking about. That could be a conversation for another time. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. It was evening, it was morning, the first day. So I have no idea how He's saying that these are word for word. One, you guys saw how little was actually in the English in that first tablet. But yeah, they're definitely not word for word. So that's not true. All right, let's go back. Let's go back to this.
Several other tablets as well, Kodapam Marabi and a few
I'm
others
gonna
have
to
made
go
it
ahead
into
and move
that
myself
text.
again.
Sumerian cylinder scrolls that talk about the creation story. Again, the creation story in the Epic of Atrahasis. And so we tend to see this copying of ancient tablets, text, and scriptures, even some papyruses, into the biblical text, meaning that my point here
Let's
is
do
is
it.
that I think a lot of people are saying that became a cargo cult, worshiping
Yeah.
people that were masquerading as gods. I
What is
Being
Wes gonna
the
say?
earth and the sky and
Um,
even us, because we are the end result of that battle. I'm just curious, when you say that there are not just parallels, but there's actual copying. Looking at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where the creation story
see.
is summarized in the Bible, what are the actual kind of parallels there that you're looking to? Because as someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me,
Yeah.
think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So what are the
I would say that, especially after looking at the Anubis Leash for the first time, and I did that on video. So, let's see what Wes Huff is gonna say.
parallels there?
separated the waters from the waters, for example. That's in the Enuma Elish.
Separated the waters from the waters. Um,
That's also in the biblical text.
that's
Okay,
word for word.
that I would agree is a parallel. The only reason I highlight that is that if you're making this the argument, because if you brought it up, and I mean this with all due respect, there the there
Okay, I
are
think we're gonna fast forward a
superficial
little
parallels.
bit.
I would agree. You know, the
But I'll
separation of
let
the water,
Wes get through this real
the
quick.
concept of the earth being formless and void. That's also in the Enuma Elish.
Yeah.
However, I think all the other details, it isn't the
The Anubis was missing a lot
it's
of
the details that
details.
make the difference. And if we're looking at not the superficial crossovers, but the actual themes and concepts of what it's saying, you don't have a creation
different.
within 7 days.
The
You don't.
Bible's not going to take the Enuma Elish and put it into the biblical text. There are certain words that they utilize that let me know that they copied it from that text. Like, for
So
example,
what words?
separating the water from the waters, the void, the earth being void. That information is literally just copied over. So it tells you that somebody saw that and said, let me add it to this book right here, or let me add it
Sure.
to the scripture or this
Okay.
papyrus, because it wasn't a book yet at that time.
So
Was
let
this text discovered that makes it parallel to Genesis?
you have this ethic that we were talking about before that I think is fundamentally different than what we find in things like the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and other things, in that we are created in the image of God. And actually, one of the earliest criticisms of
Killing.
I think I just won my taxes.
Oh yeah?
I just
I love
switched
these
from TurboTax
ads.
to H&R Block. It was
But,
so easy.
You mean I don't have to go back through all
So far, this is
in the name
not
of
going
God, which
good
has
for
been
Billy.
done how many millions of times. So my thing about the biblical text is it actually authored by the creator of the universe, or is it authored by the dark forces
Yes.
of maybe, if this
The
Satan is
Bible
real,
is
Satan himself?
Theanustas.
And the
It
reason
is
why I say
God
that is
breathed.
because
Genesis to
all-knowing,
Revelation,
all-loving
110%
God,
the word of God.
omnipotent and omniscient, that is creating not only
Omniscient.
this universe, probably
Sorry.
most likely multiple universes, because a creator never stops creating, especially with infinite power, is now at some point going to author a text that is going to allow human beings to misinterpret it and take it in his name and begin to slave people, torture people, and enslave people worldwide, to claim that you're chosen ones, to set up a state of chosen people, and then to even claim that you have chosen land, and to torture and kill even more people, women and children, in modern times, still going on to this very day. To
Man,
me,
this
that
guy
doesn't seem like a very
Billy is so
intelligent being,
lost, man.
especially a
If you
being
guys are
that
watching
knows the
this,
beginning
please
and the
pray
end.
for Billy.
So if you know the beginning and the end, you have a certain level of
It's
foreknowledge.
like
You have
Wes,
advanced knowledge that
can't remember
goes
which,
beyond. You know what's the
but
ending before the.
what's
Revealed
this?
himself to us, and it's not his fault if we abuse that. I mean, we could say so. I grew up in the Middle East. My parents worked in Amman, Jordan, and when I was living in the Middle East, there was a country called the Democratic Republic of Iraq. Now, just because
Yeah,
democracy exists and people are going to name things
that does not
democratic when they
mean that
obviously aren't,
Iraq
doesn't
is
mean
a
we then judge
democratic
democracy. I mean,
nation.
think of the Democratic Republic of North Korea, right? Nobody thinks that that's an actual a representation of
Man, there
democracy.
was
So
another
people are always going to abuse that
place.
you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect
Yeah,
that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like the Sinai
what
Bible, when
he
we're looking
just
at
said right
something like
there.
the
Confidence does not equal competence.
Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife, these are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things
Yeah,
point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
yeah.
Well, no, I'm
Amen.
glad you said that. So
Amen, brother.
those three topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So
Okay, so
that's a
he's
very
talking about
small
those three
fraction.
topics in
You
the
know,
very
that's less than
beginning,
1/10%. You talk about
which
eyewitness
were all
accounts to convince
proven
you
to
that
be false.
Christianity is real. There's been
Um,
eyewitness accounts of every culture that I visited.
so I really hope Billy um comes to saving faith in Jesus, because there's only one way to salvation, and it's through the blood of Jesus. He is the God man in the flesh. He came down, humbled himself to the form of a servant, and lived the pure, perfect, righteous life that none of us could live. And then he was crucified on the cross, and his final words on the cross were, "It is finished." And then, that made his disciples, like immediately after Jesus was crucified, his disciples were basically confused and like, crap, I guess, he wasn't it's weird because Jesus constantly told them, hey, this is going to happen to me. And he had left a hint, to the Pharisees when they're demanding a sign. And he said, the only sign that you shall receive, this adulterous generation, is the sign of Jonah. The Son of Man will remain in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And he wasn't, like Jonah. So I think that covers it for the first video. Like, subscribe, comment. If there's anything out there that you would like me to cover from a Christian's perspective, please leave it below. Thank you guys for tuning in. And we are going to be done as soon as I can stop recording this. All right, guys. Have a good one. Peace out.